So I'd like to thank you all for joining us this evening. And I'd like to thank Anne Marie, who's looking after technology in the background for me. And today or this evening, we're delighted to have John McCabe with us. John works for Teagasc and he works on the Arrivo Join program, and I'll let him introduce himself also. But this evening, he's going to look into areas for focus over the coming weeks to ensure optimum production for our cows and optimum animal health in our young stock, and I suppose overall profitability for the year upcoming. So I'd like to welcome John. Thank you very much for being here, and thanks to all our members as well for joining us tonight. And in terms of, I suppose, John's presentation, we'll try and make it as interactive as possible. So if anybody has a question, please type it into the chat box if you're able to do so. If you can't see the chat box, just raise your hand and we'll get the questions off you, and we'll take questions as we go along as well, so that I suppose people are free to interact with us as we go along and get to any answers that you might have. So yeah, I'll pass over to you, John, if you want to, I suppose, a little bit of an introduction, and we can get to it then with your presentation.
No problem. Yeah. So John is my name, obviously. Yeah, John McCabe, from County Cavan, living in Galway at the minute, with my wife Emer, who's a vet. So we're always talking about cows. And yeah, so working with the Arrivo Joint program, as we said, and covering most of all of Connacht and County Donegal and County Westmeath, facilitating groups and advising farmers. So hopefully we'll have a few good things. Hopefully keep it practical for you here today. I'll share my screen, Deirdre, to start.
Yeah, perfect. Go ahead.
Hop into my presentation. But as Deirdre said, these things work best if people can start questioning and ask questions, and we can make it informal. That'd be great. So I'll just share my screen. Now, you see that?
Yeah, that's perfect, John.
Okay. So I was actually, when I was pulling these slides together, it was very wet, and I asked ChatGPT to come up with an image of a lady looking out at her waterlogged field of grass, because that's what we were looking at a couple of days ago. But thankfully, we've had a change in the weather in the last day or two, so soils will be starting to dry out, and cows are creeping back out of sheds in most places, which is great. So look, we'll start with a nice piece on grass. We'll then move it on to the cows, and we'll then move it on to the heifers, and we'll finish up with a bit of a summary. So to start with the grass piece, we just want to maybe reiterate a few facts around spring grass, and before we even get into the spring piece, I suppose average profitability last year, it was one of the second best years on dairy farms in Ireland. But there was a massive range in profitability from people making 17 and 1800 euro a cow in the top 10% of profitability, back down to 400 to 500 euro a cow in the bottom 10% of profitability. And one of the major differences between the top and the bottom was the amount of grass grown and the amount of grass eaten, and silage too, but mostly pasture. So have that in your mind in terms of we really need to up the game in terms of growing more pasture this spring. So some facts around spring grass: if you graze more, you grow more. If you put out nitrogen, you'll grow more. As I said, the more grass you grow and the more grass you can get your cows to eat, the more profit you're going to make. And grass in the diet versus silage only is you're gonna have more milk. If you can get more grass into the cows, you're gonna get more milk with less cost. And look, they seem very simple points, but sometimes we can forget about them, and we need a bit of a refresher at the odd time. Simple targets around grass this spring, get them out. We can talk about percentages, we can talk about average farm covers, we can talk about opening covers, but the main thing is we need to get them out. And it's very, very common for herds of cows to be stuck in sheds when there are opportunities to be grazing, we come across it all the time. So it's about trying to get out. We'll talk about the different tactics about what to do, but that's the target, get them out and spread the nitrogen. We'll keep it simple. They're the two things to set up. Maybe a bit, we'll go into a bit more detail now, but if we came away with them two things in our head, we wouldn't be too bad. So just want to maybe introduce a couple of results of trials that were done out in Moore Park in the last couple of years. Sarah Walsh, who's working with the Grasslands Department at the minute, did her PhD looking at the effect of supplementation of silage in the spring, but they also looked at how much cows were eating. This is a graph that she produced on the intake of cows in the springtime after they calve. Previously, we thought that cows were at peak probably eating 17 kilos of dry matter. This research is showing that cows are now are peaking at 18 to 20 kilos of an intake after 12 weeks after they calve. Funnily enough, even heifers the heifers are well behind that, which is what we expected, but cows are getting up to 20 kilos of an intake of grass, silage, meal, whatever it is, 20 kilos of dry matter by week 12 of the lactation. That's a lot of feed to keep in front of cows. And if you have this is a 475 kilos of solids per cow herd in Moore Park. Some herds are doing more than that. We know that. So they're going to be eating more than that. They could be eating 21 or 22 kilos of dry matter. That has a big effect in April. We need to keep that in our mind, that we need to manage the grass right this spring so that when cows are able to eat 20 kilos of dry matter, that we have enough for them and we have enough grass, and that we're not holding them up with the wrong type of feed. Sarah, when she was looking at this work, also looked at the milk potential or the milk production of cows that receive grass versus being supplemented with grass and silage. So if we look at a few of the other grass that she produced, they split the cows up into two. The dark green line is cows that got full grass allowance the whole way out into for the whole time of this trial, and the lighter green bar is cows that received 3 kgs of a pit silage type feed, like a normal silage that's on dairy farms all across Ireland. Just received it at 3 kilos per head per day from week 6 to week 12. So if you think about that in the lactation, that's probably about the 10th of March until the 1st of May. So 3 kilos of silage, not much. It's a bit of silage at the barrier for 6 weeks. And you can see the effect that had on the milk protein versus getting full grass into the cows. It's huge. And what's also huge is that milk protein drop is sustained out into the month of June. They never make up the ground that the full grass cows can get. So what are we saying here? It's really important that we get the 10th of March, the 1st of May right in terms of having enough grass and getting grass into them. If we just look at the same trial in terms of milk yield, very similar results where there was basically 2 liters taken off these cows at peak, and a liter kind of sustained out into June. So there was a lot of milk lost in over a 3-month period by just feeding 3 kilos of an average type silage, as well as grass and meal. So what the point I have for you is, if you're going to be tight in April, you'd be as well off to feed them a bit of silage now, and rather than feeding it to them in April.
Yeah, that's a good point, John. Can I ask you? So you're saying you need to be feeding now, but what else do you need to be doing? How do we know how we're going to end up in this situation? So, like, a lot of people on this call might have assumed that they've been feeding their cows, 17 kilos of dry matter, and now you're telling them actually it could be up to 20, depending on the maturity of your herd and so on. So, apart from, just saying, oh, we need to feed silage now, what do you think, from a practical level we need to be doing?
So I suppose the point here is that we're trying to avoid silage from Patrick's Day until the 1st of May. And I was kind of setting it up, I suppose, that we're underestimating what our cows are able to eat, especially when they're coming up to peak. So it's imperative that we get the nitrogen out. It's imperative that we get a couple of paddocks grazed and back growing again so that we can start the second round. That's what the spring rotation planner is. If you drill it down, we talk about 30% grazed all the time. Well, why? Like why? But actually, the 30% grazed, it's 4, 5, 6 paddocks grazed and back growing again so that we can start and back growing again so that there's sufficient cover on them to start the second rotation at some stage in April. The other part of it then is having enough grass in April, and there's two or three pronged approach to this. One of them is walking the farm. So we're on the 27th of February. We're nearly into we have a lot of calving done. We've been busy head down, kind of the middle of the day has been short. But we're starting to think a bit more about what's out in the field. In about 2 weeks' time, we're going to have to start walking the farm every week. 2 weeks' time will be at 10th, 12th of March. We're heading for Paddy's Day. We're going to have to start walking the farm every week. Look back at what's coming. Look back at what you've grazed. See what's on it. See, are you going to have to push out to start the second round? See, is it good enough to start the second round on time? And then also looking forward to see, do I need to ration out what I have left of the first round? The very best farmers are getting this right. And there's a lot of people that are not getting it right. And I suppose not getting it right to me looks like a low average farm cover in April. And it looks like a lot of silage and meal having to go in to slow them up. Whereas if you think about it, Deirdre, like this is if you fast forward kind of 30, 40 days, 10th of April, there's no two feelings like this in dairy farming. There's no better feeling than letting the wire down.
Okay, come here.
Middle of April, let the cows peak. Big jugs of milk in April. It's great. You feel great. The milk pump under pressure. There's also no other worse feeling than you've gone through a big calving season. You've got your cows primed. You've your money spent. You've your time spent. You've got your cows primed for peak milk, and you have to go in with bad oil silage to hold them up because the grass isn't there. Now, the weather hasn't been great the last couple of springs. I accept that, but there are things that farmers are that need to do, and I suppose that's what I will. Well, I'll come on to. I'll move on the presentation, Deirdre, and I'll show maybe get into the practical things, but be very careful of silage basically in April, for the second half of March and into April. That's what that's saying, and the effect of it is being seen the whole way into June. Monthly milk protein stats for the last 5 years are showing a big dip in March. I actually have looked at this back to 1980. There's a dip every year. There's never been a dip a March where there hasn't been a dip. But what we have to start trying to reduce this or try to not let it go down as far. Last year is the red bar there. Our average milk protein went down to 3.26 nationally. The year before, 2023, was the orange bar. Two really wet Marches and April. They were some of the wettest springs on record. So what that suggests is that if a low protein suggests cows aren't getting enough energy, and I suppose what are we going to try and do to avoid a massive dip this March? That's what I want to get out of the next maybe couple of minutes. So how are we going to avoid a major dip this March? We're going to get a dip, but how do we keep it 3.4 or above? That's the question. So Aisling Claffey, who's the Teagasc nutritionist, has modelled out some diets. One of the things she's looked at is the effect of different types of diets on milk yield. There's in the background, there's a lot of other work in the background, but I just took out milk yield. It's coming from the diet. 68 DMD silage on the left plus 6 kilos of meal only supports 16 kilos of milk from the diet. 68 DMD, if you up the meal to 8 kilos on that kind of dry cow type silage, up it to 8 kilos, it'll support 18.5 litres. If you've good type silage, you don't have to feed them as much and you'll get more milk, 19 litres with 6 kilos of meal. But the real peach here for me, or the real benefit that we have to get in our heads for the next month, is if you can get grass by day, once a day even, grass, even if you have bad silage and 5 kilos of meal, you can get 20 litres from that diet. So you can get an extra 2 litres of milk by going grass per day, even with bad silage, versus 68 kilos and 68 DMD silage and 8 kilos of meal. So you're feeding them less concentrates and getting 2 kilos more milk. It's profitable stuff. Moving it on, if you look at the grass by day and having better type silage, there's 21 litres of milk. And the Rolls Royce, if you can get grass full time and 4 kilos of meal, you can get 22 litres of milk. So the more grass you can get in, the more milk you can get with less cost. I know we've heard this every spring, but it's what we have to start doing is get our heads in the game that we're going to try and move this red box over to the right, where we're going to try and get grass in by day at least. When the weather is hard going, I don't want to seem flippant about the last couple of springs that we've had. They've been really frustrating and hard going, but a week without grass, 10 days without grass is getting too long, and we really, really need to try and get, if we can have that in the head, grazing most days. So how are we going to do that? Mindset is huge. I am putting them out. You have to have it in your head. I'm putting them out, rather than I'm putting them in the shed and I hope to go out when I get a good week or a good couple of days. It's mindset. I would see on my travels, a lot of it is the people who manage to get them out, even in the more inclement weather, even if they don't have the driest farm in Ireland, it's mindset. The next part for me is silage. They can't be full. If they're going out full, it'll be a mess and you won't do it tomorrow. So I would say if you can milk them, stand them off for an hour or two, and then send them out with an appetite, you'll get good graze outs at that stage. Sending them out, with them full of silage straight after milking, they'll go out, they'll walk it into the ground, they'll mess around, they'll lie down, they won't graze it out well. You won't want to put them out tomorrow. Roadways are obviously key, but something I suppose if you think about 2024 and 2023, we had some of the wettest marches ever, as I said. Some people tended to go and graze everything they could, all their easiest grazing. So what I would say is that you need to save them easy grazing. These, I would call them trump cards. A trump card or an easy grazing for me is one that is on the drier part of the farm, one that has a roadway alongside of it, maybe along two sides. They're easy grazings, and there's no point in taking them grazings when it's a good day, when the weather is where it's handy. You need to save them grazings for when it's not a good day, when cows are heading for peak milk, Paddy's Day, around St. Patrick's Day, because you've seen the effect of silage in the diet at that stage. And if we take all our easy grazings, we use all our trump cards. Come to Paddy's Day, we've nowhere to go, because if we've used them all, then you're into silage, then you're taking peak milk off. It's a recipe for disaster. So it's been wet the last couple of weeks, the last week or two. We need to try and get them back out. The 2 or 3 ways of doing that, for me, are having it in the head that they're going out, making sure they're going out with an appetite, so not full to the massive bellies of silage. You need roadways, and I would say don't use all your trump cards to start, because we need to keep grass in the diet the whole way through now, and every day that passes is going to get more important.
John, there's a question in here from Margaret. So, what would you recommend to feed cows to avoid that energy dip? Now, I think you've covered it a bit in that you've said obviously that if we get out to grass, then our litres go up. But I guess
Yeah.
that rise in protein should come hand in hand with the grass.
I in that graph I showed you, I actually deleted out some other things because it was hard to look at, but the energy level of them diets, the milk yield is a proxy for them. So as the milk yield is going up, the energy of them diets is going up. So the more grass you can get in, the better. And we, like, Teagasc can be, people give us flack for saying, oh, you're mental, these are all just about grass, but it's such a good feed. Like it's impossible to match. No silage in the yard that you can feed them is going to match the energy level of grass. And if we can have it in our head, grass by day, and with that, 4 or 5 kilos a meal if you're in on silage, 4 kilos a meal if you're out. But no, and what we saw from them diets is no level of meal is going to match what you can do with even getting one grazing in. So that's what it's about for me. And we have to have it in the mindset. And the other part of it is, I mentioned at the start, profitability. The highest profit farms are eating 2 kilos more per cow per day. They're getting 2 kilos more dry matter into their cows every day of the lactation. And you're not going to do that unless you're pro grass, or you're trying to get grass into them in the spring, because they won't eat as much silage. There's too much fiber in it. Fills them up too quick. So we need it's another piece, is how do we keep that in our minds? How do we get an extra kilo or two into the cows every single day?
That's great. Thanks, John. You mentioned obviously mindset is really important there. I just had a tip come in there in terms of trying to change your mindset and getting out to grass, is if you think, what is the wettest field that I can graze today? And that'll save your dry
Yeah.
fields then for when you really need it. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
what's the
yeah.
actual wettest field today that I can get
Good
out to?
idea. Yeah, good
Yeah.
idea. But for some people that have been in the shed for 10 or 12 days, go to the driest one. Just get them out to start anyway. But yeah, and then you're right. We need to save, as you say, we need to save some of the trunk cards. I'll keep it moving. How are we not going to run out of grass in April? I don't want to sound too like this. This is not a condescending thing, but spread fertilizer, and I think we're starting to we're getting distracted in Ireland. We're missing opportunities to spread fertilizer in the spring, and we're having to hold up cows with silage in April. That's it. So it has to go out. 20 units, not a major amount. It's a small amount out early. And what that's going to do for you in the second half of March and into April is huge. So spread fertilizer. I'm after doing a couple of groups in the last week. There's lots of farms that don't have any fertilizer out, and there were opportunities. There were dry times. I'm not saying we're going out using fertilizer willy-nilly, and we need to stick to good agricultural practices, and we need to protect water quality, stay back from our buffer zones, use our urea, all the rest. But there are opportunities missed in the spring in dairy farms in Ireland. And last year, I estimate that there was probably 500 to 700 kilos of dry matter lost on plenty of farms because they didn't get any out. Last year was wet. I'm not gonna, maybe some people are right not to spread, but this year we need to make a priority when we spread when we can. We graze when we can and we spread when we can. How else we're going to not run out in April is walk the farm weekly, as I said, from mid-March onwards. Not going to get into it too much. We need to look about what's back on the first graze, what's left. Ideally, we're going to ration it out right, and we're going to start our average farm cover with 600 to 650 in April of an average farm cover. That's more than we used to do, but we have more cows and they're able to eat more, so we need to have that on farm live. Stocking rate, not going to get into it too much. It's probably a full meeting, Deirdre, on stocking rate, but high stocking rates on the milking platform. If you have a stocking rate of 3.5 or above, it's likely that you won't be able to feed them with full grass, and that's your decision to stock the place heavily, and as a result, you're going to have to feed extra. So ideally, we would say you would bring your stocking rate into line with optimal, but that's probably for another day. Stocking rate in April, we saw the cows were able to eat 18 to 20 kilos. We want to get back to profitable levels of supplementation. We're going to be probably 2-3 kilos a meal in April. That's going to be 17 kilos of grass. If you have a high stocking rate by 17, we're not growing it in April. So we just be careful in April. Don't close up too much ground. I've seen it before. We get a nice couple of days. The sun is on the side of the face when you're walking down the cow road. You're maybe the winter jacket has been traded for a body warmer, and the t-shirt is on, and we feel great. We're after coming out the other end of the spring. Close up ground for silage, close up ground for reseeding. We end up not enough acres under the cows. We end up running out of grass in with too much supplement. So just be careful. Don't close up too much in April. Get that right. So if I just move it on, Deirdre, unless you have questions.
There's just a question in there from Siobhan. What's your view, and what would you recommend zero grazing over silage? So
Yeah,
I suppose that's probably in relation to that, Paddy's Day, April period.
Yeah, so zero grazing is better than silage, definitely. Probably the same cost as silage. Wouldn't be buying a zero grazer to do it. If you can, if you are zero grazing, I would. Most people aren't experienced at it, is what I see, and they get 2 or 3 loads landed into the yard, and it takes 3 or 4 days to eat it, and that's an absolute disaster because it's heating, it's reducing in energy. Cows don't like it after a while. They're not eating as much of it, and it's so if you're going to zero graze, it needs to be gone within a milking, and especially if the temperatures are up. If it's very cold, you'll probably get away with feeding it over 2 milkings, but it has to be gone within 1 milking. Obviously, it's grass. It's a good feed. Probably a bit more hassle than feeding silage. Some people are at it. Some people are at it. I'm not saying it's not happening or it's not a good thing or a bad thing, but it is costly. I'd prefer high quality silage and try to get them out as fast as I could. If you can drive a tractor you can probably put the cows out, I would suggest. Not in most cases.
Okay, we can move on there, John. So
Yeah.
if you want.
Fertilizer, very quickly, I just want to just look at. I came up with I was getting a lot of questions about what am I going to put out next. Over the last couple of years, what fertilizer do I put out next? So if we just think about the farm in maybe 2 or 3 different sections. We're trying to get about 50 units out for the 1st of April, 50 to 55 units, and we want to get P and K out by the end of March, by the 1st of April. They're the aims with spring fertilizer: 50 to 55 units out and P and K. If you think about the first portion of the farm, might have got 15 to 20 units over the last couple of weeks, or maybe late January, early February. Question is, what do we do with them now? We would suggest, if you have an allowance at some stage in mid-March, 2 bags 18,612, or follow the cows with slurry and top up with nitrogen, and that will give you your 50 to 55 units out and your P and K. So that's the first portion of the farm. It's probably the easy portion. Got a bit of fertilizer out early. I would suggest maybe we could send this out, Deirdre. Maybe people could have it on their phone and they could follow it. It's an easy decision tree or flow chart. The second portion of the farm is ground that got slurry. People ask, what are we going to do next? I would suggest if it got slurry a month ago, it's time for 30 units now, once you can travel it again as ground dries out now. So that'll get you your 50 units out on your P and K. And then there's the other portion of the farm. Maybe it's a heavy soil. Maybe you just haven't got the fertilizer out. So the priority has to be 20 to 30 units out now straight away, or slurry. And again, if we keep thinking we need to get 50 to 55 units out, I'd wait. If you're only getting out now, I'd probably wait until the 1st of April before I'd go with my 2 bags 18, 6, 12 on that. So that's kind of an easy flow chart for people. I'll send it on to you again, but we need to get the fertilizer out. It just doesn't grow from nothing, you know, and we need to feed the cows in April. So
Yeah, that's a really good flow chart, John. I think you know, when we send out the recording, we can send out this flow chart as well, and you know,
yeah,
it'll be a useful tool, I think, to have up on the wall, maybe laminate it, or you know, to hand
yeah. I
that we
suppose
can look at in the springtime. Yeah.
that's all I have on the grass piece, Deirdre. If we summarize that very practically or very simply, silage is protein poison and it's milk yield poison, and grass is great for protein and it's great for milk yield and it's great for costs. And if we can try and get them out once every day, and it could have been this evening, it didn't have to be this morning. You could have got them out maybe this evening for 2 or 3 hours and bring them in at 8 or 9 o'clock. But if we can get them out once a day, every day for the next month on every farm in Ireland, geez, we'd be doing well. So that's the grass piece. The energy of it, it's far better feed. We just need to make sure that we don't run out in April and we have to hold the cows up with silage, and that means getting the fertilizer out. And then lastly, I suppose, on that vein of thinking, is don't use all your trump cards, don't use all your easy grazings now. And if it gets wet, Paddy's Day, we've nowhere to go. And cows are peaking. I see it every year.
And walk the farm. I think you made that point
Walk
as
the
well.
farm. Yeah,
So we're going to be
yeah,
at a stage soon where it has to be done every week. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So that's it on the grass piece, Deirdre. We might
Yeah.
move it on
Yeah,
to
there's no
maybe
question. So we move on, and if anyone thinks of anything at the end, we can come back to it. Yeah.
Yeah. So to move it on to the, I suppose, the cow side of things, your part of the brief was maybe about talking about a little bit around sick cows. For me, sick cows means hassle. It means work. It means the day is disrupted dealing with them, and it also means reduced milk yield. And I suppose a lot of the sick cows in Ireland, and a lot of the sicknesses or the transition cow metabolic sicknesses that we get in the spring can stem from milk fever. We're seeing a lot of high K silage in Ireland, too much potassium in the silage, and especially from now on to 27th of February, you're getting into the second half of the calving season on a lot of farms. Cows have been maybe dry since before Christmas. So they can get fat, they can get over conditioned, and that's another risk factor for milk fever. If we just think about what is milk fever, clinically it's a cow down. So if we spot a clinical case of milk fever, it's easy to spot. They're down. You have to give them bottles of milk. You have to maybe get the vet. You have to calcium. But the subclinical milk fever is what we can't see, or it's a silent type. So for every one cow that you see down, there could be 5 to 10 cows in the herd that have subclinical milk fever. So for every one you see, the range is 5 to 10 cows that have subclinical milk fever going on in the background. And milk fever and subclinical milk fever is the single biggest issue that can drive other sicknesses secondary to it. Um, a cow that gets milk fever, if you look at this chart, she's 8 times more likely to get mastitis, and she's 8 times more likely to get ketosis, 5 times more likely to have an LDA, retained or cleanings, all the other things. Milk fever is a disease that can drive a lot of hassle problems. And the point for me on this is it increases the days to conception. Or basically the cows that get milk fever or subclinical milk fever have less of a chance of going and calving than the first 3 weeks of the breeding season. And I've actually come across farms with 17, 18, 20% empty rates that have had bad milk fever in the spring. What's bad milk fever? 5%, greater than 5% is bad milk fever, is too much. And I would suggest if you have other side, if you're getting greater than 5%, so if you have 50 cows calved and you have 4 cows with milk fever, you've got 8%. That's too many. I would suggest you need to do that some. If you have problems with milk fever, do that some. If it's over 5%, can you feed them different silage? Over conditioned cows are a problem. If they're due in the next 3 weeks, you can't do anything, it's too late. But if they're due after the 20th of March, you can do something. You can manage their body condition score.
What would you think, John, if you're to look at your cows today, what sort of a body condition score would you be looking out for today to be worried about in April? To get me? So
Yeah,
who do
so
we need to
like
be?
if they're ideal for calving down today and they have another month to go, they're getting
Hmm.
there. They're probably I would more so go in and look at what's left to calve and say and pull out. If you have them split up based on calving date, that's ideal. You'll be able to look at the far off ones and say, well, are these. But what might be worth looking is have a walk through the cows, get out your app, whatever you're using, your ICBF book, whatever it is, and pick out some of the ones that are due after the 20th of March and take a random sample, 8 or 10 of them. And if there's a lot of them are looking fat or looking over 3.3, 3.25, they could, and if they're heading for 3.5, they could be well over conditioned by the time they calve 3, 4 weeks time. Um, if you can split them up, if you can split your cows up, what's left to calve, if you can split them up into the later off ones that are, or maybe the ones that are over conditioned that are due after the 20th of March, you could roll out straw for them, and make them eat it until it's gone. It could take a day, day and a half. You could do that twice a week. That'll keep the condition off them.
Okay, thanks, John. Sorry, now.
No
But you
problem. That's
go
good.
through.
It's good. It's good. So, one way of maybe trying, if you're having real bad problems this year, or to be honest, which I think is probably a good idea for all farms, is to if you can make a bale per cow of a low K silage. So low, what do I mean by low K? I mean a field or a couple of fields that were closed up that didn't get any slurry or K or compound fertilizer. If you don't put any slurry or compound fertilizer, you're guaranteed that, well, you're highly likely that your silage will be low in K, and that's one of the main things that will drive out milk fever from your farm. Because one of the main things that's driving milk fever into farms is the fact that silage is high K. And we spend an awful lot of time, energy, work, vet call outs, work dealing with sick cows, bits of problems, secondary problems after milk fever. And actually, this could be a really simple way of doing things, and feed this type of silage to the cows kind of 2 weeks before they start, from 2 weeks out from calving. I've seen it in a couple of farms that have adopted it. They've basically cut out milk fever. It's phenomenal. And I really think that if you're having issues, you really need to consider maybe making a bale per cow of this kind of stuff, ring fence it for the dry cows. Anyway,
So would you recommend that in your silage making then? Do you think that there's two paddocks maybe that you shouldn't put slurry out on? Is that what you think?
yeah, if you've 100 cows if you take 7 or 8 bales an acre, you probably need to close up 12 or 15 acres with no slurry or no K fertilizer at some stage in the year. Simple enough done. Mark the bales, put them in the corner of the yard. You'll make them nice and dry. Don't bulk it up so that it's up to your hip when the mower is going in. But I would because it could be too low the
Yeah.
energy for cows coming up to calving. But it's definitely it's a strong option.
Yeah.
My wife's a vet. She's every morning she's getting a call, XYZ milk fever, no bother, will be out in half an hour. Like it's every day now at this stage. She's there seems to be lots of it all around Ireland. So I think we need to start managing this a bit better. If for every one cow that's down, there's 5 to 10 more that have it, and you don't know it. So and what the problem is, they don't clean properly. It's longer to before they conceive, all the rest. So anyway, I'm going to move it on. I think we've a bit more to cover, but the milk fever is driving a lot of other issues on farms secondary to it. If you're having problems this spring, I would say you just have to manage the symptoms and manage it now for the next 3 weeks. But you could, for the later calvers, it'll be a smaller amount, but you could watch their condition, maybe try roll out straw for them.
We had a quick question in there about what about boluses, John? I suppose you kind of tipped on it there. If you're in the midst of a bit of a crisis with milk fever, that's probably going to be an option. But if you're trying to prevent it, then yeah.
Yeah, it definitely is. So as I said, there's the short term and there's the medium term. Short term is if you're in the midst of it, yeah, bolus, calcium bolus is going to help. Is going to for any at-risk cows, which is your older cows, your crossbred cows, your over-conditioned cows, and I would say also at-risk cows or cows that are on farms that don't have enough feed space. They're probably at-risk cows as well, because if you don't have enough feed space, access to minerals mightn't be not all cows are maybe getting their fair share. So yeah, bolusing is helping a lot of farms, but it's hassle, it's cost. I think for next spring, aim for this type of silage. It'll make life very easy. But yeah, boluses work.
Great. Yeah, we'll move on, John, because we have a bit more, as you said, to cover.
Yeah. Thin cows. I just want to maybe this is the same cow. I just found a video on my phone earlier on of a cow on a farm there last March, Paddy's Day, and it's the same cow. It's a first lactation cow. Do we think she's thin? I think we do. We all know that. I suppose the picture on the right was when it's harder to pick her up there. Only we ran her up the crush did we pick her out of a herd. It was a 200 cow herd, so harder to pick them out. But I think it's worth having a look at your cows 2 or 3 times during this month, coming and pulling out cows for once a day. If you want to keep a cow in the herd, she's much more likely to conceive if she doesn't lose a major amount of body condition score. We want to keep that body condition score loss to less than a half of body condition score. That cow is far too thin. She's far less likely to get in calf in the first month or 6 weeks of the breeding season. It's a great tool. Once a day is a great tool for cows as we come into March now. Have a think about it. Some first calvers may be under pressure. Another thing that I'm coming across, Deirdre, really common, more common than people might think, and it's feed space. Now that's a fairly it's a fairly stark photo. That's just one I found online, but there are lots of farms in Ireland that don't have enough feed space. That has come home to roost, or it's bitten in the last couple of springs. If you think back to last March, April, cows in sheds because it's so wet. If you've 200 cows and you've enough feed space for 150, what's going to suffer first? And I would suggest it's these first lactation cows, like the one I'm after showing you. they're the ones that don't get access to the barrier. And one of our focus farmers last year learnt this the hard way. Nearly all heifers calved early in the start of the in February. I think all bar one was calved in February last year. There's only 10 calving in February next year out of a bunch of 40. Feed space was lacking. Heifers not getting full, so they were getting sex semen in May. But they had gone through a hard spring, I suppose, with the weather. But when feed space is lacking, the first cows to suffer are the first lactation cows and the less dominant ones. So just be careful if you don't have enough feed space, 60 centimeters per cow for the milking herd. As we get into the middle of March now, if you have to house the cows, I'd be putting a ring feeder out into a yard somewhere. It mightn't be pretty. I'd be putting a ring feeder out. I'd be maybe feeding cows along a collecting yard if you can. You have to collect that slurry. But whatever you have to do it, I would do it. Some people have drafters. A lot of people have drafters on their farms now. If you find yourself inside the 20th of March, nearly the whole herd calved, and you don't have enough feed space for them, you could draft out 20 or 30 cows or however many cows and put them somewhere else that with a ring feeder or two. There are solutions. But for me, doing nothing and putting all the cows into the shed where there isn't enough feed space is really affecting a lot of things, and it affecting first lactations the most. So that's it really on the cow side of things. I didn't want to get into too much sciencey stuff really, Deirdre. For me, it's feed space. Manage your thin cows with once a day, and try and manage your milk fever as best as you can, avoiding over-conditioned cows. And for next year, maybe it might be an idea to make low-K silage.
Yeah, brilliant. Caroline made a point there. She said she was recommended from someone in the discussion group to feed oats and soya to cows 2 weeks prior to calving, up to the point of calving. The oats lower the K in from the silage, and the soya gives better colostrum, and it seems to be working well for them. So
yeah, that'll work if the silage is really bad. So we recommend 68 to 70 DMD silage, which is an indicator of the energy in the silage. If it's at 65, 64, that'll work. And I'd be more interested in the soya than I would the oats.
And then that's expensive. But anyway,
it is expensive, but it's
if you have to do it,
it'll make a change for next year if it's expensive.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is, yeah. But
it's still another, I suppose, means, but a more expensive one than making the right silage.
The only way you're going to know is if you've tested. I suppose there's no point in doing that just blanket, because it is expensive. You might need to do it. More than likely, you don't. So yeah.
Cool. Young stock is next, is it?
Yeah. So just maybe the last part of the presentation is around young stock, both calves and heifers. So if we just maybe start with calves, I've heard some crazy prices for calves. I'm kind of worried. I'm worried that we won't have buyers for them in a couple of years if we take all the money we can get, and people get burned. I don't think it's a good thing, but it is what it is. There's a big demand for calves out there at the minute, and it's good because we can sell calves at 3 weeks of age. Selling calves at 3 weeks of age versus selling calves at 5 to 6 weeks of age is the number one method of reducing pressure on you and on the shed. It's the number one way of reducing pressure, is selling them at 3 weeks of age. It's great. You could get an extra €100 per head if you can get them over 50 kilos this year, above probably feed costs. That's what the prices are saying to me now. But at what cost and at what risk? What's the point in keeping calves to 5 to 6 weeks of age to get them to 50, 60, 70 kilos? Why are we doing that what's the point in doing that if we don't have enough space in the first place and we're under pressure ourselves? Because as sure as night that follows day, St. Patrick's Day will come around, or in the latter half of March will come around. The temperatures will rise 2 or 3 degrees. The sheds will get stuffy. The sheds are already dirty from the whole calving season that gone by. What happens then? We all know what happens then. So I would say, at what risk? I would whatever you do, try and get your calves moved on before your sheds get under pressure. That's I suppose the main thing, and we're trying to avoid pneumonias and scours. But if we think back to, like, what are the aims with calf rearing? We need to grow the calf in terms of its size. We need to grow the calf in terms of its belly, its rumen, because she has to eat grass for the rest of her life. And we need to avoid sicknesses. The rumen piece is very important, and I think we need to talk about it, and we will. Avoiding sickness is hard, is a kind of a multifactorial. We need colostrum is obviously key. Dry beds, don't overstock the sheds. Hygiene. You wouldn't believe the amount of farms that I go to that don't have a foot dip set up at the door of the shed, the calf shed. Okay, so people are coming in from calving boxes, cubicle houses, spreading slurry out the fields, discussion group, and they go into the calf shed without dipping their feet or cleaning their feet. You wouldn't believe the amount of people farms I come across that have that. In terms of hygiene, another thing is clean out the pens. It's hard. We're busy. The middle of the day is short. Minute we don't have time, but we need to get time and get help and make time to start upping the game in terms of cleaning out pens and bedding up pens now and having dry beds. And I would suggest, as we start to sell calves, some of us will be selling calves from home. They're advertising on Dundee or selling them to people that your neighbours or people that repeat customers. I'd buy 2 or 3 cheap pairs of wellies, size 6, 10 and 13. Surely everyone would fit in one of them pairs. They might be a bit loose on them and a bit tight, but surely the majority of people coming to the yard, be it a vet or a prospective calf buyer, could throw on them wellies rather than the ones they had on in Bandon Mart or Athenry Mart or Rafo Mart. Like they could be bringing in anything. So buy 2 or 3. I think it's probably not a bad idea. Avoiding sickness is key. So I suppose we know that probably some of the things that we're not as aware of is the effect of stress in calves. Calves, and I suppose, what is stress? Before we get into stress, what is stress like? What are the events that cause stress? It's once a day milking, of feeding. It's dehorning them. It's weaning them. It's all of these major enough vaccinating. It's all of these major events that happen to the calves. They cause stress, and what happens then is if a calf is stressed, there's a spike in cortisol, which is a stress hormone, which then reduces the ability of the immune system to fight off infections. It also affects the digestive system. But so I suppose if we think about this, right, imagine the scenario. You dehorn the calves, but you don't do it until the 10th or 15th of March. You've been busy, it's been wet, you've been trying to get the cows calf, slurry, grazing, yada yada, right? So you don't get it done until the 13th to 14th of March. You're also not selling calves because you want to get the extra 50 quid out of them. You want to get them 5 or 6 weeks old. You want to get them up to 50, 60 kilos. So you have a lot of calves on hand. The sheds are bulging. Then what happens? We know what happens in the middle of the month typically. It gets warmer, right? It's a perfect storm. You've got overstock sheds. You've got warmer environment. And then you go and disbudge your calves and they're under pressure. and just scour can run through the whole place, and even pneumonias. It's a perfect storm, especially when the bacterial load is so high. So what I would say is sell your calves to take the pressure off the sheds, clean out regularly, but disbudding or dehorning should not be done within 10 days of going on once a day milking, or vice versa. Once a day feeding. I keep saying milking. So once a day feeding shouldn't be done within 10 days of dehorning. I wouldn't do anything with calves, any major event with calves, within 10 days of each other. So I'd never dehorn calves within for a couple of days of putting them on once a day milking. They're all stress things. Calves are stressed when you put them on once a day feeding. Like, if you think about it, you go into the shed in the evening, they're bawling at you, they're thinking they're going to get fed. Then you go out and they're not fed. They're stressed. They get a strike in cortisone. So we have to take it a bit slower with calves. I suppose as I said, a rule of thumb is kind of stress in general. Wait 7 or 10 days between events. Dehorning is a funny one. Legally, you're allowed to use a farmer is allowed to use local anaesthetic for between 2 and 4 weeks old in Ireland on calves for disbudding. You're not allowed to use local anaesthetic any other time or situation, but you are allowed to use it for calves disbudding between 2 and 4 weeks. But it's mandatory that vets give local anaesthetic for calves that are 4 weeks plus. So what we're saying here is, and like I came across it day before yesterday on a farm. I said, when are you going dehorning? He said, oh, I think I'm going to do it next week. And I said, do you use local? He said, oh, no. I have a crate. I have a crate for training them. To me, that's archaic. We need to use local anesthetic and painkillers. It's a really sore thing to happen, and it's a big stressor on calves. Won't get into how it's done. I suppose you could watch videos or you could talk
You
to
want to
someone
look at
how
us?
it's done. Yeah.
But
Um,
nobody's talking about dehorning.
I have heard of some other ways of doing it as well, where vets come in. Have you heard of that, Deirdre, ever before, where vets come in?
Yeah, we were discussing it here.
Dehorning?
So like from a practical point of view, I used to do all the dehorning and it used to take forever, take about an hour to do 10 calves, between loading them, doing the local, doing everything right, giving them a non-steroidal. And then we had a chat with our vet and decided, you know what, um, is there space here for sedation? Is that something we could do? So now what we do is we do a big kind of grouping. The vet will come in, sedate all the animals, give them all local at the same time. So I suppose they have a double anaesthetic really. They have their general anaesthetic, they're sedated, and they have the local, and they wake up and it's like nothing has happened. They also get a non-steroidal.
So you
Um,
knock them out.
yeah. Knock them
Yeah,
out and then we'll do all the dehorning. Yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, it's important to do the local as well as knocking them out because at least they'll get the hour-long benefit of that local anaesthetic um still working around the nerve area around the horn.
Yeah.
Um and then the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory then that works for 24 to 48 hours, depending on what you use. But like it's a mill, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? If you give a mill of, I mean, it's nothing really, and it could save you an awful lot of hardship.
Yeah.
And it does because it's a job that's done very quickly then. It doesn't take, the world, yeah.
I've experienced it when I was farming over in England. 60 calves, all knocked out, shed
Yeah.
quiet. It's kind of funny, really, but
Yeah.
it's really, really low stress, and the
Yeah.
calves recover really quickly from it. It's a good idea.
Yeah. And if you've lots of hands on deck as well, it's good if you need to give your second booster of your Covexin or whatever it might be. You can kind of get everything done rather than having to handle them, from a manual point of view as well,
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So anyway, be careful around dehorning because again, I'm coming across lots of places that aren't giving local anesthetic and painkillers, and we need to. It's the gold standard. Rumen development. Calves are fully reliant. They're like us. They're monogastrics. They're fully reliant on milk. They can't get anything from grass or forage in the first month of their life. But they turn from that over the space of about 3 months. They turn from 70% monogastric to being able to get all of their nutrients from grass to being ruminants. So the most important factor in terms of developing the rumen is starter, concentrate, meal, and our crunch. It's the most important. It's less important than the longer fiber. How do we drive concentrates intake? Fresh water. There was a trial done on calves that got water versus that didn't. Fresh, clean water. They ate 30 to 60% more, and they grew by 31% more than calves that didn't get water. So it's really important that we offer fresh, clean water. It is also important that we offer a longer fiber source to get the mechanics of the rumen working, developing. But I suppose one of the biggest points is that we need to start our concentrate intake has to be, you need to start offering calf crunch to calves within 4 or 5 days of age, and little bits. They're only going to play around with it to start off, to be honest. They'll only be, but eventually, after a week or two, you'll start to see that they'll be eating more and more of it. High levels of milk and high levels of milk powder, they actually don't eat as much concentrate. The rumen can be slower to develop, and you just want to watch it. You want to you'd want to be careful that you don't wean your calves too quick if you're feeding very, very high levels of milk, because their rumen mightn't have started to develop early enough at that stage. So just be careful if you are feeding very high levels of milk. I suppose in terms of what type of ration or what type of, I would say calf crunch is the best to get calves going. It's sweet and it's coarse. The one on the left there is the ideal type. The one on the right there is too fine. It's not palatable. It's not acting there's no mechanical action in the rumen either. So choose a good quality one, not a dusty one. And if you'd like to feed meal or calf pellets, it's fine, but I would prefer to start my calves off for the first 2 or 3 weeks on the crunch, and then start mixing it up with pellets until you get them onto the pellets after 6 or 7 weeks. But it's critical that we get the rumen.
It's a bit of a fine balance, isn't it, John? Like, because you're saying for the first month, well, actually, they don't get any energy source from. So even if you're offering meal quite early on, you're trying to increase that milk to get their weight up. But then you're trying to balance that with, trying to get the intakes of the meal up and reduce your milk in order to do that. So it
fine
is.
balance. And it's just a warning for people if they're trying to push the milk up to 7-8 liters or the milk powder up to 1 kilo, that kind of stuff, that it can actually reduce the amount of starter concentrate that they'll eat. And which then by nature of it will delay the development of the rumen. So you just need to be careful. So the amount of concentrate that calves are eating is the critical piece in terms of weaning. Some people are getting the weaning wrong. Sometimes it can be done wrong. 15% of mature weight is the advice. But eating 1.5 kilos of concentrate, minimum 1, but ideally 1.5 kilos of concentrate is the most important factor. And I would say the other question in terms of when to wean would be that there's no other stressors going on. But the reason I'm kind of harping on about it is it's very important. And last year in 2024, August and September, we got there was about 50 farmers weighed their bulling heifers or their weanling calves, They're heifer calves at 6 months of age, August and September of last year. 50 farms, 2,500 weights. Over the space of them 2 months, when them 50 farms and the 2,500 weights, what I found was there was 25% of them calves were greater than 20 kilos behind target. So a quarter of all calves are greater than 20 kilos behind target under 6 months old. That was last year. If I set the bar a bit higher, on that project I did with the discussion groups, if we said that 15 kilos is behind target, that figure rose to a third, 35%. So there is a problem with rearing of heifers. Some of it is to do with the calf stage, some of it is to do with when they're at grass. But the reason I'm harping on about developing the rumen and eating 1.5 kilos of concentrate, the reason I'm harping on about it is because calves can get a check when they go to grass, April, May, up until the end of June. They can get a big check. And we really, really need to get this piece right. And so if there's one thing you take out of this is how we're going to get these calves eating more concentrates over the space of the spring. More starter crunch really. That crunch is a nice it's nice and coarse, you know, and it's good for developing the rumen. So that's the calf piece.
Can I ask you, John, quickly, just from a practical point of view, you're saying 15% of the mature weight, okay? So, but like they're obviously going to all have a different varying breeds, like a purebred Jersey is going to be very different to Holstein. Is there anywhere you can go to just get that information for, you know, of what that would look like, what their mature weight should look like, or are you guessing?
No, there is somewhere you can go to find the mature. It's more work. If you want to weigh
Yeah.
your calves and wean them off weight, it's more work. It's the gold standard, but it's more work. You can find their mature weight on ICBF. Every calf will have a maintenance sub-index there, which is basically, it's a predictor of how big or small they're going to be. There's any amount of articles on AHI or Teagasc websites that'll show you what they should be based on I'm not going to get into figures. A bigger live weight animal is going to have to be bigger when she's weaned. Not going to get into figures, but you will find it on any of them websites, but also on your own Herd Plus profile. If you look in there, there's a heifer and weight profile. So if you weigh your animal, so you weigh your heifer calf today, you put it into your ICBF, you go into that profile, it'll tell you what her mature weight is meant to be and what her target weight is meant to be on that day. It won't tell you what her weaning weight is meant to be, but it will tell you what her mature weight is meant to be. And then you can multiply it by your 15%, your 0.15. But look, I think we could get into a lot of detail on that, and most of us aren't going to weigh. And the more important piece for me is that they're eating 1.5 kilos of concentrate, that we're getting the rumens fully developed, and that they don't get a big check for 2 or 3 months after they go out. That's the most important piece. And I suppose the last, so we'll wrap it up in a sec now, but the last bunch of animals on the farm that I'm concerned about, or I want to talk about, is the bull and heifers. I've told you we had about 50 farmers weigh their weanlings last August, September, 2,500 weights. It was a great project. Farmers coming back couldn't believe that there was so many behind target. It was a very interesting project, and I suppose the reason we do it, the reason we want to get heifers onto target is milk solids. So I followed a bunch of farmers in the Arrivo region. We've been doing a lot of work with them. During the Profit Monitor meeting in January, I looked at the top 5 farms in a group of 20. Sorry, the top 4 farms in a group of 20, the top 20%, and we looked back at their heifer weights from 2023, their R1s, their weanling heifer, and the top 5 farms for profitability had normal levels of calves are underweight, so 15%, right? The average of the group had 45% of their weanlings underweight, and the bottom 10% or bottom 20% of profitability farms that when we looked at their profit figures this spring, when I look back, 64%, so 2/3 of their heifers were under target. I'm not saying it's a driver of profitability. What I am saying is that it's on these farms. It happened to be that the better farmers had less animals under target, and the lower profit farms tended to have an issue. When I followed them animals through to and we looked at their milk recording figures, they delivered last year on them farms, them same bunches of animals delivered, the ones that were underweight delivered 319 kilos of solids on the bottom 20% farm, and versus their counterparts or the other farmers in discussion groups, their first lactation animals delivered 424 kilos of solids, or milk recorded 424. Now, there's probably other management factors at play, but what we know is that the trials that have been done on heifers before show a similar trend, that underweight heifers don't produce as much milk. So heifers underdone in their first year don't produce as much milk, and they also don't reach puberty. So this is a trial done in 2005 by Frank Buckley. On target heifers in the green there, 77% of them had had a heat by the time breeding came around on the 1st of May, versus underweight, very underweight heifers, only 55% of them had had a heat. So if we add this up, right, if we add up the project I did with the 50 farmers last autumn, where a third of heifers were underweight, and then and we look at this trial and say, right, probably only half of them underweight ones have had a heat, and then we're trying to fix time AI them with sex semen. It doesn't work on a lot of for these for in a lot of cases for these underweight heifers. So we need to be very careful that we have our ducks in a row for our heifers. If we look back, then I'm going to finish up now. This trial, when they followed the heifers through, the ones that were very underweight in the red bars, 82% of them reached their first lactation. So there was 18% wastage. You see in the red bar there, there's wastage in all groups, but there's 18% of them didn't. And if you follow them through to their third lactation, heifers underweight in their first winter, going into their first winter, there's only 47% of them reaching their third lactation, versus heifers that are on target, going to the bull, into the first winter and going to the bull, that have hit puberty, there's 2/3 of them reaching their third lactation. So these lassies they're underweight as calves, you're setting them up for a short career in dairying. And I suppose that's the point. Try to get your heifers weighed a couple of times in the year and get the light ones out. There are light heifers on farms as we speak. The only way of knowing is weighing them, and the best thing to do with them is put them out to grass and feed them meal now as we come up to, we've basically 60 days left before a lot of them will be bred. 60 days time is the 27th of April. So be careful on that. So unless is there any questions or will we summarize, Deirdre?
Are there any problems associated with them being a good bit over target now, over 2 months before breeding?
There are, yeah. I have seen reduced conception rates on very overweight heifers, and as you can see in this trial, the yellow bar, the very overweight heifers, there's a bigger wastage by the time you get to third lactation. If they're extremely fat, they can have fat on their ovaries, and I suppose the other part, the last piece is if they're getting a really good do in the shed, if they're being done really well in the shed, and then if they go from a very high plane of nutrition to a very low plane of nutrition, you can have reduced conception rates. So they need to be on a rising plane of nutrition the whole way through for the next 3 months. So it's kind of hard to crash. Like there's very little you can do now really in terms of holding them back. I would say not much anyway. You might be able to do something for a couple of weeks, but just watch it. Just watch that they don't become absolute monsters by the time you come into the parlor. Would be the last point. Yeah.
And as you said as well earlier, John, they're the most at risk in the springtime in terms of getting the first pick of grass and, silage barrier space, and there's
Yeah.
all these things going against them.
All
So
these things, like it's so common that there isn't enough feed space, that heifers are coming in under target, that where silage isn't good enough. All these things add up to big wastage of heifers and lesser conception rates and profitability at the end of the day. So to
yeah.
summarize I suppose the summary points, unless there's more questions in, Deirdre, is there?
No questions in relation to that. There's one point on weekly calf price data available on ICBF website if people are interested. Yeah, so
Yeah,
that's
it's a
Feel free to put in questions now if you want, guys, as well, and we'll look into them there once John has finished up.
Yeah. So I suppose to summarize, grass into the cows every day. If we can have that in our brain for the next month, from now until the 27th of March, the next month, grass in every day if we can. I would say don't use up all your trump cards. I think it's people have been caught plenty of times before with nowhere to go. Feed space critically important, as I said. Nitrogen, we have to grow more grass. Growing more grass linked to more profitability. Growing less grass linked to less profitability. I'm seeing a lot less nitrogen going out, or a lot more farms that aren't spreading nitrogen until into the second half of March, and we're losing out. We're not growing enough for the second round. Milk fever, 5% is too many. It's causing other issues, secondary issues. Watch body condition score. Watch your minerals now as we get into the second half of calving, and silage. If it's a big problem, if you could change your silage to a different forage, that'd be great, to a different silage. Bull and heifers, get the light ones out to grass and give them meal when they're out if they're very light. Calves, I would say avoid stress, especially around disbudding, local anesthetic, maybe even general anesthetic, anti-inflammatories. Grow the rumen. One of the major parts of growing the rumen is the amount of starter concentrates. And that's it for me, really. Tonight, and I'm welcome to take any questions or open it up to the floor if you want.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, John. I don't know if there's any questions going through. We'll give people a minute to pop them in the box if just to give a bit of a chance. Obviously, thanks for your very good presentation, Sean. And you're doing an awful lot of research there in the background in the Midwest that we're all very happy that you're doing. I know you like making a big impact even, on each individual farm. I know last year we would have been part of that group of heifer calves that were, being weighed, and we fell into the group with 20% underweight. And I suppose I definitely feel like from a management point of view, we've done an awful lot since then. And, they're very much looking like they're on target now, which is great. So very delighted to have you.
We can't forget about the R1s. For me, it's a pet thing. Like and it's different for every farm. Some farms, the reason that they might be behind for one farm might be different to another farm. One farm might be overstocked. They're running out of silage, so they close up every acre they have that they can cut, and they put the calves into a garden somewhere and expect them to grow and expect them to milk and go and calf when they come in. On another farm, it might be their calf rearing or their weaning. And
Yeah.
another farm, it might be the fact that there's 20 calves that go out into a 10 or 12 acre field for a month, and then they go to another 15-acre field for the rest of the summer. They're not
Yeah.
getting moved on. So we need, but I suppose the last point on that, and it's something I meant to say, is that while there was a third of calves behind target, I would say half of farms had acceptable levels of, like, normal levels of calves that were behind target. They'll catch up, but the other half of farms had a really big issue. So averages hide a lot. There was half of farms grand, and there was half of farms it was actually affecting their milking herd, because
Yes.
they're being held back by 20, 30, 40 kilos of solids because their heifer rearing thing is wrong. It's offside. So it's just, that was the point I meant to make, is half the farms have a problem and half of them don't. Yeah.
Yeah. And I suppose, as you said, averages are dangerous as well, because
Yeah. I
yeah.
suppose, look, all of these things, I'm after talking about all the best practice, and then you go out tonight, there's cow calving, you want to get to bed, maybe the child be fit, whatever, and then you get up in the morning and it's busy, like the middle of the day is short and it's hard to get all this stuff done. I would say if the fertilizer isn't out, get the contractor to do it, because the likelihood of you getting around to it now is low. Slurry contractor, as you said, you get the vet in to help with the horn, great stuff. Milking, that could be done by someone else potentially. Try and get help is for me, is if you can get help and not be under so much pressure that when you get to April, you're able to put the head down and think about peak milk, peak grass, profit for the year, getting prices on everything. Like that, they're the things that make the money at the end of the day. So if you're under pressure, try and do something about it.
Get help. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good point. And
Best luck to
people are doing crazy hours this time of the year, and they can't even see. It's very difficult to think about weanlings, and it's difficult, they probably very much go down the pecking order. There's some comments in there. So from Lanier, fantastic, to John. Great practical points, and love the R1 heifer story. Mary says, well done, John. Great, especially the R1s. So lots of positive feedback on that. And Ruth says, thanks, John. Great info, especially on the heifers. So this webinar is going to be available for our members. It'll be sent out afterwards, kindly by our comms team. In addition to that, John is going to forward on that really useful tool, I suppose, that we can, if you're welcome to print out, we'll forward that on as well, on fertilizer management and where and when to put out fertilizer on your farm over the spring period. In terms of our web events, so the next date will be forwarded out by email. So there will be one upcoming in the next few weeks again. And in terms of our live events, I suppose, our in-person events, I know that the West Munster regional team have an event happening on March the 3rd, 4th, 5th and 6th in Kilmehel in County Clare. And that is a one day quad bike training and safety workshop. Now that's the official training, so like it's a legal requirement to have this training in place if you're, I suppose, driving quads and all that. I don't know the ins and outs of the details, but if it's something that interests you, there's some details there if you'd like to, and it's all up on our social media as well. So you have to book with Edel. So that's it, John. Thank you so much for giving us your time and your evening. We really appreciate it. And thanks to all the members for joining. And yeah, we hope you have a lovely evening. And yeah, that's it. Thank you so much. And thanks obviously to Anne-Marie in the background who's looking after everything.
Long. Thank you.
Okay.